Welcome. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at this 4-piece corner clamp set. So this was provided to me by the distributor, but they're not compensating me for this video and they're not reviewing it before I post it. If you find this video helpful and you want to purchase one of these, I'll put a link to it in the description on Amazon, and if you use that link it helps me out a little bit and doesn't cost you anything extra. Get this open. So this comes in a cinch bag, and here we have the clamps. So this comes with 4 clamps. The Amazon description says these are made of aluminum and stainless steel. So the clamp bodies are likely the aluminum, and I'm guessing the stainless might be the threads. So these clamps can be used to clamp things at right angles to each other. So you would open this up, you would put your board in here, and then tighten it down. And this is your 90-degree reference. Let's get some measurements on here. Let me pull one all the way out. So this opens up to just over 3 inches. The movable jaw is looks about 5/8 inches, and the fixed jaw is just slightly over 5/8 inches. And then this is 3 inches wide, although to the end it looks like it would be about 3 1/4, I think. The full height of this is about 1 1/8 inches. Hopefully I got all the dimensions there that are useful to people. Looks like we have holes here that are chamfered, so you could actually mount this down to a surface, so you could screw that in. Now you can't turn these if they're laying flat on surface. So if you were to build some sort of jig where you'd screw these down, you would actually have it raised up a little bit so you can still turn these. Let's see what that would need to be. So the lever here hangs down about 1 1/2 inches. So I cut up some boards to make a frame. So let's head over to my shop and test these out. Okay, so here I have some wood parts I cut up. So this is oak. So I can take the clamps and I'll open them up. When you store these, you can leave these in the last state you used them in. Since this is fixed, this doesn't stick out. It's not going to take up more room in your storage if these are sticking out. Okay, I have all these opened up. One thing I noticed on here is there's a little groove. So when you put a board on here, if you have a little bit of sawdust in the corner, it's not going to raise that up. That's a nice detail. So to install these, I'll put these on the 4 corners. And as I mentioned, you can screw these down to a surface. In a situation like this, I'm going to have these upside down. If you mount it on a jig, you might mount it like this. So this will be a little easier if I move to the edge of my bench here. Okay, so to clamp these down, I'll line up the corners and I'll tighten the clamps. So I'm going to just start tightening all of them, and then I'll adjust them and do the final tightening. So I have a little bit of a gap here. I can close that up before I tighten it down completely. Now here I can't spin this all the way around, but I just slide it and I can move it. Okay, now that I have all these snug, I can line up each corner and tighten it down. Okay, that's all tightened down. Okay, so here we can see it from the other side. We have all the miters done. There are some little gaps here, but I think the wood was a little bit warped. So your miters are only going to be as good as your cuts. So now I can measure this for square. So I have 18 5/8 here, and I have just over 18 5/8 there. So I can pull on this just a hair. And there we're at 18 5/8. So now that we have this all clamped up, we could have glued this. We can also brad nail or screw these. If you're using a brad nailer, you don't want to hold it like this while you're putting a brad nail in. You don't want that nail to go in your hand. You don't want to hold away from it, which is the whole reason you have clamps. I'm just going to throw a screw in here. Okay, so I'll be using these 2-inch trim screws in the corners. I'm going to pre-drill with a 7/64 inch drill bit because this is oak and it could split out. So when I put the screw in, it did kind of pull this part of the miter this way, even though it's clamped, but this is a tremendous amount of force. On a larger frame, I'd probably put a screw in from both sides. On a frame this size, I'd probably just glue it most of the time, and maybe put a brad nail in. I just don't have my air compressor fired up, otherwise I'd do that. I'll go ahead and throw a screw in on each corner. There, I did a little bit better job putting that screw in so the corners lined up. Okay, so I have the 4 corners screwed together. I can remove the clamps. So here we have our frame here, and this is actually pretty sturdy even with just the one screw in. So if you're making multiples of these, you can just leave the clamp like that and it'll be easier to attach to the new frame. So when I originally was cutting this frame out, I had cut some really short sides, and then I realized that in this clamp, I could clamp one corner, but I wouldn't be able to clamp the whole thing at one time. So you can use this with smaller frames. You just have to do little pieces at a time. Let me get a more accurate measurement here with this. So that's about 3 3/8. So that would be, I think, 6 3/4 inches would be the minimum size you'd need on the inside to do 4 clamps for a frame. So that's clamping up miters. We can also clamp up boxes. So I just have some scrap wood here. So let's say these are the sides of boxes. The way you'd clamp this up is we'll put one piece in and we'll overhang it. We'll snug that up a little bit. We'll take the other piece and we'll butt it up against that. And this one will clamp down tight. And we'll loosen this one up and we'll slide it over until it just touches that edge. And now that's clamped together, so we can put fasteners in here. And you can see that has a nice joint there. So if you're making boxes or carcasses or things like that, you could use these corner clamps to clamp up the different sides to hold them together while you attach them. There are also instances where you could clamp like this. So maybe you're making a bookshelf. This is the side of the bookshelf. This is the shelf. You could clamp that shelf in place while you put the screws in. Now you can see here, I'm only partially clamping this. That's probably not good to have an uneven load on these clamps, but I don't have this real tight right now. But on a bookshelf, this would be a longer piece. So that's the 4-piece corner clamping set. As the saying goes, you can never have too many clamps. I think one of the more difficult things to clamp up are frames, boxes, carcasses, things like that. So it can be helpful to have a set of corner clamps. It can even be helpful to have multiple sets of these. If you're doing some cabinets, you could put clamps on the top and the bottom and then have everything lined up before you start putting fasteners in. But for smaller things like frames and small boxes, I think one set is just fine. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.